Hi, we're here on vacation. I'm Dr. Carrie Lam, and this is my dad, Dr. Michael Lam. We're on a family vacation here in New England, seeing the fall colors. We decided to do a video on travel tips for people with adrenal fatigue. So, how did you prepare when you came here?
Well, traveling is perhaps one of the most rewarding experiences as a family. We are a travel-oriented family, so we spend a lot of time away from the office trying to bond and develop the relationship with each other, especially we work closely together. However, I found that traveling can be a very challenging proposition for many people who have adrenal fatigue. I myself had a major crash during my travel trip, of course, some years back. So, speaking from first-hand experience, it is something that you really need to plan and work out to prevent crashes.
Yeah. So, what can adrenal fatigue sufferers do to plan when they're ready to go on a trip?
Well, I think the most important thing, Carrie, is to realize that travel is not only an exciting event but a very stressful event as far as the body is concerned. And good planning, comprehensive planning is key, and that starts from the time the travel plan is put in place. So, well before the day of travel, for me, for example, when I was weaker during adrenal fatigue, I already planned out what I'm going to do well before,
Mm-hmm.
and I prepare my body,
Mm-hmm.
and that is so important because a body that's prepared will be able to take on the stress of travel.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people when they travel, they have to think about the supplements that they have, and how do they plan for that?
That is quite challenging because, especially for those who have a lot of supplements on their regimen, I would sometimes, first of all, well before the travel date, when I know that it's going to happen, I would advise my clients to actually build up the body to reduce stress. For example, not to exercise too much a few days before you actually um, travel, to bring up the reserves of the body so that it has that capability to go through that travel episode. As far as supplementation is concerned, if a person can be strong to take the supplements, and sometimes I would increase the supplements before the travel to increase the reserve, but sometimes I would actually advise reducing to the supplement load for a period of time before the travel to reduce metabolic overload. So that is one very important strategic decision. And with my clients, I actually meet with them well before to plan out a schedule, especially for big travel events such as weddings, holidays, Christmas, and the congested airport. So that supplement is not only about supplements; it's about really the pre-planning that goes into it to have a body system that matches it, and also not only a regular supplementation, but also a emergency kit that is specific for that body during the travel time. This is all planned out ahead of time. It's not left out to accident, so to say.
That's good. Any other tips for before they go on the airplane, when they get to the airport?
Well before that, even in the booking of the flights, you had to start at that level. You want to avoid, for example, midnight flights or red eye flights that can be stressful for the body's circadian rhythm. You want to arrive in your destination in good shape, very easy transition. You try to avoid, for example, flights that has a lot of what we call
Transit.
transits. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and if you happen to have a choice of flight time between congested, heavy traffic hours, you want to avoid those. You want it to be a very peaceful, serene type of experience well ahead of arrival to the airport. Because most people don't realize that most of the stress in the body happens during the preparation. And as far as the body is concerned, stress during and before the actual travel is actually physiologically just as stressful as during the travel episode itself.
Mm. Oh, that's good to know.
So yeah, so staying, for example, staying well hydrated for how long, having your food ready in your pocket before you go. Your snacks has to be properly scheduled out. Your meals, for example, what kind of fluids do you want to bring? Especially nowadays, the airport have very strict rules. So you want to be able to comply with those rules and not be fumbling, looking for a place to dump your liquid in case if excessive. It would happen to me. I was not quite clear on what the rules are, and every country is different. Sometimes they want you to take off your shoes, sometimes they want you to go through certain baggages, and so the screening facility, etc., all have to be factored into as much as possible. But it's good because nowadays there are many, especially more advanced airports that has, for example, the facilities that allow you to rest. But I think well before you get to the airport, the key is the planning before. And then you have to know your body, know what kind of supplement makes sense, what kind of supplement can be potentially problematic, what can you do well be ahead of time.
That's good. So these are tips to how to plan before you get to vacation. And so thanks for sharing.
Yeah, in fact, I have a whole chapter in my book, Adrenal Fatigue Syndrome, that's devoted to travel. Because so much of us travel nowadays, and you want to have a good experience before, during, and on landing. And it will give you step-by-step approaches on how to make that enjoyable.
Thanks for watching. Enjoy your vacation.